Hello, hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday afternoon to all of our fellow people on this call. Thanks for joining. My name is Keith Hawkey. I'm a technology advisor at Opkalla, and we have the pleasure of spending some time with one of our partners, Crayon. And the focus of today's call is to talk about how to optimize, reduce costs, know what you're spending, and how within the Azure environment. Azure has become a popular location to host anything from business essential workloads to ERP, you name it. And there are organizations that have significantly large Azure environments. So today we want to talk a little bit about how Crayon has come up with a unique way to manage that spend and get the most for your money, and ultimately help reduce the cost with, that's always a popular thing to talk to a CFO about. So I'll pass it over to Michael. And if you have any questions, you can send them in the chat box, and I will push them over to Michael and Stan. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Listen, thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Michael Vinos. I'm a senior partner development manager here at Crayon. I'm based down in Hilton Head, South Carolina. I love working with folks from Opkalla, so I'm thrilled that we're able to do this webinar together. As you can see, we've got a pretty full agenda for you. That was the introductions part. We're going to be running through some cloud metrics and challenges, cloud economics and optimization. Stian will be delivering that. Some different ways that Crayon can help, some use cases and some customer success stories, but we do want to keep this interactive. If you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt. Makes these things a little bit more interesting for us. Everybody likes to try and play Stump the Crayon guy. It's always entertaining. So any questions you've got, I guess they'll either be read out from one of the moderators, but yep, with that, a little bit about Crayon. Headquartered globally out of Oslo, Norway, with a US headquarters in Dallas, Texas. Crayon is a customer-centric innovation and IT services company, and we believe in the power of technology to drive a greater good. In more than 46 countries, covering 80% of the global market, Crayon's 3,700 people deliver on the promise of integrity, quality, pace, and agility. Whether it's software optimization, cloud optimization, or data optimization, Crayon creates business value for our customers and partners. And although the purpose of this call, we're going to be speaking specifically about software optimization, maybe in subsequent calls, we can go over the cloud and data offerings that we have as well. As you can see on this slide, we are a Microsoft, we're a heavy Microsoft partner. We are not specifically a Microsoft shop. A lot of the optimization talk when it comes to licensing kind of centers on Microsoft, but we do optimization work for almost all publishers, although major publishers anyway. We are in the Azure Expert MSP program. And we do have some advanced specializations below. These are all areas where we can work together with the Opkalla team and you and your customers on. See on the next slide. So just at a glance, again, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on Crayon, but who we are, I think, is important. As you can see, we've got a bit of a global footprint there. We are in 50 offices across 46 countries. We pride ourselves on strong relationships. We've been in business for over 21 years, and a lot of that success is due to the strength of relationships we have with all the major publishers. The strength of those partnerships is something that we pass down to our partner ecosystem. So we let that economy, we share that economy of scale with partners that we work with, like Opkalla. As I said, we've been doing this for about 20 years. We started in a Vikings garage in Oslo, Norway, specifically to try and save some customers money on their licensing spend. That has grown into a global corporation. We've also been doing data and AI. We're going on 9 years. We were named Microsoft's 2019 Data and AI Partner of the Year. So we do have some experience in that area. We are growing rapidly. Every time I see this slide, it's higher than the last time. We're at 3,700 employees. I would imagine it'd be more than that shortly. We pride ourselves on our technical chops. We do have over 7,000 certifications across a wide scope of software publishers. And we're pushing just over 70,000 customers, and that's with a focus on everyone from SMB to mid-market to enterprise, and a particular interest in SLED in public sector. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a background on Crayon and who we are and how we work with Opkalla. And with that, I will turn it over to Stian to dive a little bit deeper into software optimization.
Thanks, Vitos. Hi, everyone. My name is Stian Sorgard, and I'm on the software and cloud analytics team here at Crayon. So what the team does is we're really focusing on reducing our customers' overall software spend. We don't necessarily care if our customers are fully on-prem, if there's a hybrid environment, or if our customers are already up and running in the public cloud. By the public cloud, I mean Azure, AWS, and Office 365. We kind of take that holistic approach, but obviously, since we see customers moving more and more and spinning up new services in the cloud, that's really where we focus when it comes to our services and our engagements. So I'm looking forward to sharing what my team does on the call with you today. I want to talk a little bit about the trends and the challenges that we typically see out there in the market. I'm going to talk to you how the Crayon approach is different. And I'm also going to talk to, if you are going to engage with us, I want you to walk away from the webinar today to have a good understanding of, the timeline. How does an engagement look like? What are the deliverables? Does this tie back to FinOps? Kind of all of that good stuff. And just to echo Vitos and Keith, if you guys have any questions, feel free to post them and we can, answer them along the way, or if we are waiting until the end, feel free to stop me, because if I'm just going to talk for 30-40 minutes here, it's going to become a little bit boring. So feel free to chime in and ask questions. So just to kind of set the stage a little bit, we are really good at what we're doing. And on average, when we conduct a cloud economics engagement, we trend actually around identifying cost savings around 25%. It's pretty high, but it's kind of a twofold approach to that. One is, as you probably all can relate to, navigating the cloud jungle in general, it's a challenge. There are changes all the time, and this is kind of in general, it doesn't just tie to or pertain to Azure. They are launching new services, new options kind of all the time. So how do we stay on top of all of kind of the offerings that are out there? How do we even navigate that? We also see that a lot of kind of net new projects that are being kicked off will typically trigger kind of the cloud spend. And obviously, by kind of stating the obvious here to kind of the last bullet point there, the cloud spend and the public cloud in general, it tends to eat up a lot of the IT budget. So how can we make sure that we're providing good visibility into what's being consumed? How can we close the gap between, the ones that are spinning that up and between the ones that are actually paying for the services? And how can we obviously right size, optimize, and navigate this together? Crayon last year, we actually conducted our own survey. And it really kind of shows what we kind of already know, right? That everyone wants to save money, and it's really a top priority for a lot of the IT leaders out there. I'm sure you can all kind of relate to that. It's interesting to see that, the larger kind of the company, the more focus we actually do have on those cost savings and what we're looking to kind of achieve. We typically see that there are three kind of main areas that Crayon is looking to kind of bridge. So three typical challenges. One will be, to provide the visibility. How do I know what I'm spending today? Do I have a good insight into what departments that are driving the spend? Do I know what categories that are driving the spend? Do we have full transparency between the different teams? So in many cases, there's a good benefit of having that improved visibility so that we can kind of follow the FinOps workshop into, okay, how do we get kind of that starting point and that foundation? So we want to inform everyone, this is the current footprint that we have. In other cases, it's actually hard to identify the ones that are responsible for the cost. Like I said, we tend to see a pretty big gap between the ones that are spinning up and using the services and between the ones that are actually paying for that. So sometimes it can be a challenge to kind of break it down and for us to distribute that cost. And if we don't have the visibility, if we don't know what's driving the cost, it's going to be a real challenge to actually bring the costs down and to get the right sizing going. We also see that in many cases, our customers, they don't really stay on top of things. They don't have the capacity to navigate the jungle that I just described on the previous slide with all of the changes that are being implemented. And we often see that we don't have the knowledge in order to execute on recommendations and be really proactive. And if we don't have someone that's responsible to drive the cost, meaning we don't really have any resources, then there won't really be any progress either. So like I said, we're here to kind of bridge all of those gaps to make sure that we have good visibility into the cloud spend. We want to optimize. And once we have optimized, then how do we operate and how do we kind of govern that and make sure that it's not getting out of control further down the road, if that makes sense. And I don't see any questions, so I'm assuming this makes all sense thus far. I want to talk a little bit about the Crayon approach. And like I said, what makes Crayon different. We see that typically Microsoft, being AWS, Oracle, IBM, they are kind of out there.
May I jump in just for a moment? Tim, you had a question. I'm going to just allow you to talk here. Tim, are you available to talk? Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I must have hit the wrong button. I do not have a question right now.
Okay.
No problem.
Let us know if you have one later. So what I was saying is, this is kind of the typical approach that Microsoft, IBM, Oracle, kind of all of the larger publishers out there, they have kind of their to-go-to SKUs. They are literally pushing their own kind of agenda. as we all know, Microsoft, they all like to bundle stuff. So they make it a challenge to kind of navigate all of this. So in order to make it look, hey, this is a good deal, maybe they will throw in a discount and then everyone should be really happy, right? But at the end of the day, that additional discount, it doesn't really mean anything if we are oversubscribing or if we are paying for a lot of features and capabilities that we're not looking to leverage down the road. So how we kind of operate is, instead of kind of pushing Microsoft's agenda as an example, we are really here to right size, to prevent you from oversubscribing. Also using Office 365 as an example, we do a lot of Office 365 right sizing. How do we drive road mapping discussions with our customers? How do we, create user profiles to really reduce the footprint? And then maybe on top of that, maybe we can get or negotiate like a 5% deal. And at the end of the day, the result is a good chunk of savings, rather than, like I said, pushing Microsoft agenda, by really focusing on the right sizing, reducing that footprint to make sure that we're not oversubscribing, and then negotiating. That really puts us in this space or in this situation where we're really able to drive out the cost. And as Vitos mentioned, we are really here to optimize, to innovate. So my team, we're all about, reducing the spend. So really identifying money, and then we can take that and to reinvest into other kind of good projects that we want to run with. And once, we have kind of the insights into what we're consuming, what we're looking to achieve for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, it makes kind of we're coming from a position of strength, right? When we're doing the negotiations, and we're eliminating a lot of assumptions when we drive those road mapping discussions together. I'm going to kind of address the elephant in the room a little bit, because there are, within the Azure portal, there are kind of recommendations as well in terms of, hey, reserved instances, or this is what you potentially could do to optimize and reduce your overall spend. But those recommendations are very generic. They do not take your needs into consideration. It won't really have any visibility, obviously, into your roadmap. So in certain cases, they might be a little bit off. So when we take that holistic approach by really understanding this is where we are, this is where we're heading, then we are able to provide legit and executable recommendations back to our customers. Now, the good thing with cloud spend in general is that it's being invoiced monthly, right? So if you guys are consuming, let's say, Azure under an enterprise agreement today, we know that, hey, we have the annual true-up process. That's typically when we will have to submit changes when it comes to the Office 365, meaning the modern workplace and the on-prem servers. However, for cloud, since we are getting those monthly invoices, we can go in, we can apply those changes, and you will literally see the result of those changes on your next bill. So we are here to really identify the quick wins and really reduce and drive out the cost. Another thing that I would like to mention is let's be honest, like I said, there are some high-level recommendations within the Azure portal, but at the end of the day, Microsoft is here to increase your spend. They're not necessarily looking for you to reduce your overall spend. We will be on your side of the table by taking this holistic approach to understand, pull your data. This is what we have today. This is where we're heading. This is kind of what's important to you. And then we'll kind of tailor our recommendations and circle back with legit, like a legit action list, so to speak. And obviously, before I continue here to the next slide, we've done hundreds of these cloud economics engagements, and we have some use cases. I'm going to talk to some of them here at the end as well. But we want you to drive out the cost and really identify those quick wins. So just to kind of talk to our approach in general, we have kind of three main areas that we're typically looking into. Obviously, for the consumption this is what we're consuming today. These are, like I mentioned earlier, these are the categories that are driving the spend. We typically see that compute is a really good chunk of the invoice in combination with storage and infrastructure in general, in SQL and DB. Those are kind of the main categories that are typically driving. And for those kind of products and those categories, we tend to have a lot of metrics to play around with. So obviously, all of the optimization and the right sizing, it's all about capacity management. So obviously, again, we're going for the quick wins. So what kind of reserved instances do we have in place today? Are we bringing any owned licenses over to the cloud? So as you probably know, for Azure specifically, and since Microsoft wants to make it attractive to move from on-prem Microsoft to Microsoft Cloud, there are Azure hybrid use benefits, meaning that we can bring those Windows Server and SQL licenses over to Azure. In general, when it comes to cloud, we don't have any compliance issues, but AHub is actually one of them. Because when we are spinning up net new services, you're literally clicking or checking a box stating that, yes, I have Azure hybrid use benefits, but it doesn't really check back to, the LSC or whatever active software assurance coverage you have today. So that is something that we will look into when we do the optimization. I will say in 99 of 100 scenarios, customers have not leveraged all of those benefits, but sometimes, like the 1%, we have actually identified that, hey, you have actually allocated more than you actually have under your EA or MPSA today. So let's make sure that we're kind of mitigating that risk. I want to talk a little bit about the tagging too. Part of the optimization and the engagement is to look into the tagging. We will always take kind of your policies into consideration whenever we are running with an engagement. If you have not applied any tagging today, we will work with you on leading practices. We typically want to tag as much as possible when it comes to the cloud. So when I'm talking about the deliverables here later on, you will see that kind of the governance piece is also included as part of those recommendations where we are sharing the leading practices. The reason why we are looking into the trends is if we just do like a snapshot for a month, certain services, certain instances, they might have really low usage while they have pretty high usage other months. So in order for us to provide legit recommendations, we need to have those discussions with you. This kind of ties back to the road mapping. And like I said, for us to understand where we are today, kind of your priorities and your focus areas, and how do we look into the roadmap and what's important for you for the next, year or so. So we need to look into the trending to kind of have that overview. We are pulling, I have that here in a couple of slides, or the next slide. We are pulling all of your consumption data through APIs. So it's a really easy setup process, but it will pull kind of all of the data and all of the insights that we are looking to achieve in order for us to run with the engagement. I also want to touch base a little bit about, how do we even pay, or how do we consume all of this? The optimization in cloud, it's kind of twofold. One is to make sure that we're not oversubscribing. So how do we work together on the right sizing? But then how are we going to pay for that? Should we do a pay-go with Microsoft, meaning that we're just kind of getting, month to month, there's no commit. If I want to end it tomorrow, we're all good, In order for us to have that flexibility, you will typically consume Azure under list price, meaning no discounts. Or should we look into, if you have a fairly large Azure spend today, should we look into making an Azure commit? That's typically where discounts will be applied. Now, discounts from Microsoft could be a flat, discount across the board over a 3-year term. It could be where we have credits applied once you hit certain kind of milestones. Or should we even look into some funding if we are, let's say, moving from on-prem to the cloud? And then in certain scenarios, the publishers are willing to apply funding in order for them to get the consumption up and running fairly easy. So I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the approach and kind of the holistic approach, and that we take the kind of the twofold approach, because there are potentially additional savings to be had if we are, doing a commit and things along those lines. Do we have any questions this far, Keith, or are we good?
I don't think we have any questions. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask? I think we're okay for now.
We'll take that as a no. This is kind of the data collection that I was talking about. We are, and I did add AWS here because I want everyone to be aware of that we do optimize AWS as well, and kind of the deliverables and the approach is the same. Now, as you probably know, from when we are bringing our own licenses, there are different use rights when it comes to AWS versus Azure. We can bring SQL licenses over to AWS, but we cannot bring any Windows Server licenses. So the Azure hybrid use benefits, obviously, they do not apply to AWS. We are, like I said, asking you to configure an API. We basically need a read-only access within your tenant so that we are able to pull all of the consumption data. Within the consumption data, we're, hey, what's being consumed, but we're also pulling into, okay, what kind of reserved instances do we have today? Do we have any saving plans? So that we're basically pulling all of that into a really nice cockpit view. And I'm only mentioning that because Crayon, we are heavily, like I said, we're heavily focused on optimizing the cloud environments in general. So we want our customers to have one consolidated view if you are looking to engage and bring in multiple kind of publishers. So this is just like a quick snapshot of how that initial kind of cockpit view can look like. Like I said, we're building everything around the FinOps workshops so that we can inform, we can optimize, and then we can govern. So how do we operate and make sure that we're not getting out of trouble again? And once you're up and running in the cockpit view, obviously there are multiple drill downs. But I think this is a really nice feature, and this is a Crayon IP as of today. So I want to talk a little bit about, deliverables. So obviously, if you were to engage with us, you will get access to the dashboards. We are very transparent. We like to kind of visualize what's being consumed today in a really nice way for you to have insight into potential quick wins and quick savings. And obviously, we are able to drill down here based on category, per subscription, per region. So, we basically have all of the different options and visibility into, down to the details of how is the CPU on this instance consuming today, how it's performing, what's the kind of the usage of that instance. Obviously, within the dashboards, we have a lot of numbers, we have a lot of charts. So in order for us to make that a little bit more readable for a larger audience, we also put together an executive report. Obviously summarizing, these are our findings. This is what we're seeing from a trending perspective. This is what we are recommending, and we will literally build like an action list for our customers. And this is something that I want to emphasize, is if you don't have resources internally to execute on those recommendations, we can help you. It's really in our interest that you see the value and that you're actually able to execute and realize those savings that we typically identify. If you don't realize those savings, then, what was really the value for you guys to engage with us? So we are really staying on top of things. We want you to realize those savings, and we want to see the result of the engagement. We typically run this as a managed service, meaning we're coming in, we're doing the initial optimization. Obviously, with you guys having access to the dashboards, we're putting together this executive report. Then after 6 months, we come back and we do the second report. We do that to make sure, like I said, that we have actually executed on those recommendations, but we also want to right-size any net new services that you might have spun up. Circling back to where we started on this webinar, there are so many changes all the time. So how do we make sure that we're kind of incorporating that into the analysis? How do we drive out the cost? How do we prevent you from oversubscribing? And like I said, with the Azure Hybrid Use benefits, that's actually something that we do include as part of the deliverables. There are also within the dashboards, we have actually created, when we go into the Azure portion of the portal, there is an additional tab specifically for Azure Hybrid Use benefits to show us, we can basically populate how many licenses that we have today with software assurance coverage. We will then map that against the number of VMs that you have deployed. And we have even included in the portal a script. So if you don't have assigned Azure Hybrid Use benefits today, then it's a very easy step because we have kind of pre-built everything for our customers already. And this is what I talked to, that we are building everything around the FinOps framework. Everyone on the software and cloud analytics team here at Crayon, we are all FinOps certified. So obviously we're building kind of our services around this. So we want to inform, optimize, and operate. Part of the optimization engagement will not to create processes per se, but we are more than happy to come in and run like a FinOps workshop too, if you need some guidance around how to define, the cost centers, who's responsible for what, how do we charge back, what are the leading practices around tagging and all of that good stuff. But for the cloud economics in general, we solely focus on optimizing, reducing the spend, and then we're here to support you to realize those savings as well. I said that we're trending around 23% when it comes to any cloud economics engagements today. I wanted to add this slide just to show that, we're not making this number up. We obviously have a bunch of case studies. So if you're kind of interested in talking to some of our, previous engagements or current customers, let us know, and we'll be more than happy to kind of facilitate those discussions as well. And as you can see, we've kind of added some with a decent spend here, and then some on the lower end. We typically, from an ROI perspective, we typically come in if you have an annual Azure or AWS spend above 700K. In those scenarios, we tend to see a really high ROI, meaning, already in the hundreds. So again, we're here to identify the quick wins, drive out the cost, and then how do we manage this together going forward? So those were really kind of the topics that I wanted to cover today, for everyone to have a good understanding of the Crayon approach, what makes Crayon different, that we are really on your side of the table, the deliverables, and then, we're here to support you and deliver this from a managed services perspective going forward to make sure that we're maintaining a healthy cloud footprint.
Thank you. It looks like we, how long does an engagement typically take?
Yep.
And what efforts are required on the customer team?
Yep. Both really good questions. Typically, our engagements, like I said, we tend to deliver them as a managed services. But once we have the APIs up and running, it's a fairly easy process. We have instructions. Most customers prefer just to jump on a quick call with us, and we hash it out and get everything configured in 15 minutes. Then we want everything like the consumption to pull for a couple of weeks. We are pulling consumption data on a daily basis. But after we have all of the inventory data and the consumption data, we tend to have kind of the initial readout after 3 to 4 weeks. So in order for us to get the SOW executed until we have a final kind of readout, I would estimate around 6 to 8 weeks in total. So again, we're here to identify the quick wins, and let's work to prioritize and how we can drive off that cost together.
What about IT teams that don't have a cloud development team internally. Can you guys supplement some of their internal resources in this regard if they don't have the bandwidth or the resources to help you accommodate?
Yes. So like I said, in order for us to pull the consumption data, it doesn't require a lot. There will be some validation along the way. But like I said, we are more than happy to execute the recommendations with you. We have a cloud engineers. And like I said, it's in really our interest for both parties that we are executing on those recommendations so that we're seeing that the cost is getting reduced. So yes, we can work together. We are also more than happy to come in and facilitate any FinOps workshops to create or define processes and create a framework if needed. So we kind of take that holistic approach, and we will really be on your side of the table.
Excellent. And help me understand, how does Crayon's Cloud Economics tie directly into FinOps?
So the entire engagement and the dashboards are built around the FinOps framework. A lot of challenges that we're seeing today is our customers, they don't have good visibility into what they're consuming, what's driving the cost. That's why we have the dashboards, so that our customers will have access. We are updating them on a daily basis because, like I said, we need to follow the trends too when it comes to our recommendations. Then we will optimize together, which is the second phase of the FinOps framework. And then once we are in a good state, how do we make sure that we're staying on top of things and then being more proactive? And there's a lot of good intelligence built into the dashboards that we have. So that's how everything ties back to the FinOps framework.
I've got a question.
Please.
How do you guys approach a merger or an acquisition company that's going through trying to isolate, all the duplicates and how do companies that are merging or being acquired handle that, and how does Crayon work with them?
So we do a lot of M&A kind of assessments in general. In those scenarios, I would actually recommend that we're also looking into what we have on-prem today, because if we can consolidate, optimize, or if we are getting rid of certain entities, then we want to know what licenses do I potentially have to bring over to the cloud. And then from an Azure public cloud kind of perspective, what kind of tenants are we looking to keep? Are we consolidating? And then we will basically work with you guys to, circling back a little bit to the road mapping, where should we really focus? What's important for you? So that we're together identifying those quick wins, and maybe we put other, let's say, tenants or subscriptions further down, on that focus list. But we would really need your help and kind of your guidance as well in terms of where to focus and what are kind of your priorities.
Did that help answer your question, Jim?
Yeah, it did. Yep.
Yep. Because what just to kind of add in general to that question, typically when we see mergers and acquisitions, there's a lot of additional waste that we can get rid of, because in certain cases we do duplicate stuff. So again, how do we just kind of stay proactive and make sure that we're reducing that spend, and we don't really want to pay Microsoft or GCP or whoever more money than we absolutely have to.
Do you provide recommendations from a discovery call or some initial assessments outside of a paid professional engagement?
So we're more than happy to share some leading practices around, what we can and cannot do in order for us to really deep dive into, what's being consumed, to validate how we assign the reserved instances, for us to provide, recommendations around savings plans, tagging, all of this. That will be a paid engagement. But share leading practices, yes, we're more than happy to do that to get kind of the conversation started. What I typically also ask for is, in those scenarios, please share with us maybe your invoices for let's say the last quarter, because that will give us a really good insight into what you're consuming today. What's driving the spend, and then maybe we can build a business case together around, based on what you're consuming today, are we projecting or estimating 30% savings, or would 10% be more doable? So the more insight and the more we understand of your environment, the better kind of recommendations can we provide in general. And obviously that ties back to the APIs and when we're pulling kind of everything that's being consumed today.
And so 4 months is about the minimum you'd like to see, it sounds like, as far as invoicing goes.
Yeah, typically like 3 months, maybe like a quarter. That's a really good starting point, because then we can also see if there are any, trending. Do we have a month-over-month growth? And then, like I said, with the kind of the twofold approach, one is make sure that we're right-sizing the environment, but then also from a contractual perspective, how are we going to transact all of these services? So if we have a decent spend and if we are projecting a pretty high month-over-month growth, then how do we potentially work together to negotiate with Microsoft for that commit? How do we also navigate those options? Because, let's be honest, Microsoft, they like to make things complicated sometimes.
What are some of the most common practices that you see organizations committing that lead to high cost? Are there any basics that you could share on the call today that you see all the time that are most prevalent?
We typically see that instances are being underutilized. So we are, subscribing to more capacity than we have to. A lot of our customers are in general starting to look into reserved instances. At least there are some, reservations here and there. But we really need to make sure that those reserved instances are being assigned to the right resources and the right instances as well. And sometimes it doesn't really add up. So by applying, the reserved instances to something that is running, 5 hours a day is probably not ideal. So we want to shift them over to something that's preferably running 24/7. And obviously, like I said, with the Azure Hub Reduce benefits, when we can bring our own licenses to the cloud, I'm sure I'm stating the obvious here on the call, but for Windows data center licenses, we have dual use rights, meaning we can use them to cover any on-prem data centers, so physical cores that we have on-prem, but we can also apply them to the Azure VMs. And actually the combination of a reserved instance and Azure Hub Reduce benefits, we could reduce a instance with up to 80%. So it's all a matter of staying on top of the different products that Microsoft have, how do we navigate the options, and how do we become proactive to make sure that everything is assigned correctly in the most optimal way. But that's typically how we identify a lot of ways today that it's not really applied in the right way.
Wow. Well, unless anyone else has any questions, I just want to thank you for the time you spent today to help educate us on everything that Crayon does and how you help your clients.
Of course. It's been great being on.
Wonderful. Well, with that, we'll close up. If anyone on the webinar has any questions, would like to follow up, you can reach out to Elizabeth Davis, and she will point you in the right direction. So thank you. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, bye.